everybody, welcome back to the collective. I got an awesome plan for you today. Shaun just came flying in at the last minute. And
flying in, disorganized flying in.
Yeah, I'm just gonna razz him.
Luggage in the aisle.
Shaun's definitely not the guy that stands up when the plane lands. He's not the guy that stands up. He's just sitting there like, no.
Honestly, that's that's an interesting point that you raised, Chance, because I am the guy that I don't stand up until the very last second on a plane. Because what's the point? Where are y'all going?
Mm-hmm.
The door's still closed.
Mm-hmm. I am the guy that stands up because
you are.
My legs are freaking
There's so many
jammed into the back of the seat. I need to stretch out. I need to get up and just
everyone thinks that, but no one has to at all, ever.
I do.
No, 100%. You don't. Oh, yeah. You could have lasted another 60 seconds. You could have lasted another half a day, by the way.
No, I'm going to be that guy. I just want to be that guy. That's right. That's how. So, before we go into the actual conversation, I want to remind everybody, make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and be notified every time we go live, which is every day. So, we have some interesting thoughts and some interesting concepts that we want to dive in today with Gino here, which is awesome. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate once again having you on here. It's gonna be awesome,
brother. It's my pleasure, man.
Anything off the top of your guys' head, Shaun or Gino? Any thoughts that you're burning about, or maybe wondering about, conceptualizing?
No, just a quick comment.
Okay,
and it's this: how weird the Gino's here. And I right away took it for granted, like, oh yeah, Gino's here. That's cool. How weird is that, right? Because what I should be thinking is like, awesome, Gino's here. But I've already met him. I already know he's a cool dude, and I'm just happy that he's here. So I've already moved through the rational process of establishing that he's a good dude and blah, blah, blah. And now I'm not going to make a big deal out of it because I'm just like, oh yeah, Gino's here. Good. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Where really I should be establishing that it's like, yes, Gino's here. So my bad. I've already normalized you.
I kind of like it though. I like being normalized in a very big way. Yeah, let's stay in that lane for sure.
Yeah, that's the lane I'm always in.
Hey, I can appreciate that, man. I will tell you, Shaun, I really, really enjoy your clips on your Instagram page on your bike rides. Like,
cool.
Dude, beast mode. I'm watching him. I'm like, holy smokes, man.
Yeah.
Shaun gets after it.
I do get after it.
It's awesome, brother. It is awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I quite enjoy when he first started. This was something great. If you go way back into his Instagram, or I think it might be on the old Instagram.
Oh, yeah, my old. Yeah.
When he first started doing this, he would ride to a random tree, like on his trails. And then he would
tree of suffering, not a random one.
Okay, sorry, the tree of suffering. And then he would bungee cord his phone to the tree of suffering, and then he would do a little chat.
That's
and then
true.
There was times where he would get these videos of himself like riding down the trail from the third person off the side. And as he was doing it, I was thinking about he actually has to ride there, get off his bike, wrap up his phone, get back on the bike, ride back up the trail, then ride all the way down, and then come back and then get his phone, and then come back and edit it later. And I was like, yeah. Social media 101. This is it.
That is a fascinating subject, by the way, and right up the behavioral scientist alley. And it's because of this. So when I started this whole freak show, and it is a freak show, when I started it, I was so mega uncomfortable with it, Gino. I mean, I can't even explain how uncomfortable I was. There's way harder things that I've done that felt way easier.
Yeah.
And so it just wasn't me. I just wasn't into it. Every fiber of my body didn't want to do it. I was hating on it so much. Yeah. The only reason I did it is because of my buddies who were just chirping at me and telling me that's what I got to do. And actually calling me freaking rude names, man.
We did.
They did, all of them. And that's okay. I'm used to rude names. I've been called lots of things in the past. Most of them are warranted.
Yeah.
It's just the way I run my program. But all the troops were hassling me, and I finally committed, and I bungee corded my phone to a tree and stared into the eye of Sauron and got after it. Dude, it took me a long time to even not want to do a 180 and do a fighting withdrawal away from that camera. But I committed, And day after day, day after day, day after day. I don't even know how long it took me until I didn't want to like transport or beam into another galaxy away from that phone, but it was a long, long time. And so now I find myself, easily slipping into this little conversation, and it feels normal. It feels good. It feels righteous because I'm doing it for all of the right reasons, of course.
Mm.
And like to start, what I
Yeah.
had to do was this before I even started day one, as is my way. And maybe you could talk about this, perhaps. Do we even have topics?
I do have topics, but this works too. Let's give her.
Yeah.
So I'm curious.
Yeah.
How I run my program is when someone says, "Hey, Shaun, go be a podcaster. We need you to do that." And I look at the problem and I think this, oh no, another start line, another void. Is that what I want to do? Because I know my way. I've just done it too many times. When I step on the edge of the void and look into it, I have to deeply consider that first step, not because it scares me, because I know what I'm like. And what I'm like is this: all in. I just target lock. I don't even know what the general outcome might be. I just figure out, oh, you want me to smash it? Time to smash.
Yeah.
But before I take that first step, I know that what it will cost me, because I'll just go so hard at it. And I've got to know that it's for the right reason. Because if it isn't for the right reason, then at some point in my smashing, it'll feel non-synchronous.
Right.
So I establish it's going to be good for everyone. I look at the void and I go crush it. But holy moly, it's uncomfortable. So what I did was I went out and studied all of the nerderific YouTubers out there and thought, oh, it's done that way, that way, that way, that way. And one of the ways was someone puts out a camera, you ride towards it. You say, oh, hey, how you doing? Look at, oh, surprise, a camera. Well, while I'm here, maybe I'll talk about it. And I just mimicked a bunch of ways that people were trying to present how to do things better, betterment of the species. And trying all of those different ways, none of them really worked for me. It all kind of felt like fake. And so after I tried a bunch of different variables, I thought, what the heck? I'm trying to be something that I'm not. Why don't I just do me and then talk about that? And so that's what I've been doing, to not great success, perhaps. But I don't care about the success. I just care about connecting with people. You know what I mean?
So, Shaun, let me ask you, like, especially in the very beginning of the journey, like the idea, absolutely not, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to be that guy, right? What do you feel was the thing that was preventing you from embracing it, right? Because obviously it sounds like the tipping point was, man, all the guys are saying I should do it. I come to this consensus that, look, if my guys want it, I'm going to provide it for them, because if it's for the greater good, I'm there, right? Which is a staple value that I think you've carried throughout your military career and obviously post-military as well, right? But that thing that kept you from doing it was the idea of, look, I've been trained to be a quiet professional for such a long time, and now you want me just to kind of put it all out there, right? Or was it, this is new, and I don't like, I know how I do new, and I go hard, right? So I'm not sure if I want to like go all in and commit to this thing that I don't quite fully understand, hence the idea of doing the YouTube thing and figuring out what's what. But what do you feel is the thing that what really was preventing you? Because we know what the tipping point was.
That's a great question. Right to it.
Yeah.
Insightful and exciting.
So almost the reason why I brought him back.
Have you ever done this before?
I'm totally, listen, I'm just pulling this stuff out of a hat right now.
Do you have a behavioral scientist for dummies 101 right next to you and just flip to the right page?
So true story. You're talking and I'm putting bullets, right?
That's like, awesome.
On what you're saying, because I want to go back to it. But yes, please go ahead.
Perfect. So you raise a great and insightful question. And I would say that there's two issues that I had right from the get-go. And it was the moment that the troops started asking me to do this, I know what I'm like, as I said. And the part that I didn't state was I go at things hard, but I also establish 10-year projects. And so when I looked at this, I thought, this is going to be a 10-year project. And I've got to take that. I've got to consider the long-term considerations, the severity of my actions once I execute against this, the ripple on effect of not only for me, for my family, for my blah, 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 for the big consideration at that time was I was a high performance race coach looking after athletes around the world. I'd been doing it for 15 years and I was on the precipice of, man, if I do this, I'm all in. And that means I'm going to have to give up all of my athletes. That's going to require me to stop coaching. And I love coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a career branching point. It was a life direction branching point. And so those two things I had to take seriously because of the 10-year project. And then the biggest the biggest challenge for me perhaps is I knew if I was going to do it, I was going to do it the right way. And that was be righteously who I am. And I'm not concerned about talking about anything or any big subjects or any scary subjects or deep subjects.
Yeah.
But I did know that I was about to step out into the interwebs and talk about those things. And dude, I'm kind of a private person, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though I put content out there, I don't want to put that content out there for me. Is to try and inspire others to try to do this strategically, tactically, blah, 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 whatever.
Right.
But I do it for reasons other than my own. And it's freaking uncomfortable, man. And so before I did day one of it, I knew that I was going to be talking about things. To my point, let me raise not to put too fine of a point on it, but raise a impactful topic that I knew would eventually bubble up that I'd never talked to anyone about publicly. And it's the fact that when I was a teenager, my brother, who no one knew that I had until recently, committed suicide because of bullying. And so it was just yet one more thing, as many of the troops are committing suicide for a variety of reasons. I just thought, yeah, I get it, man. I can connect with that. I can connect with you. I can have that conversation. It's not like I'm just some dude who doesn't know how to tie his shoelaces and I'm going to give you advice. Like I've lived a life that has some things that I can add fuel to the conversation. And man, I knew I was going to be talking about things that were going to be uncomfortable, but once I got right with the righteousness of it, then I just kind of dug into it.
So it's a really interesting thing, right? So 2 points there. You mentioned doing the right thing, right? And obviously the word right within of itself, right, is an incredibly subjective term, right? And so this idea of, okay, within the culture, the macro and micro culture that you have been accustomed to as a warrior, right? And as someone who has served, right? And someone who has sacrificed, it's very clear what right and wrong are, right? In that domain. But when you go out into the internet and the web and you put it out there for the entire world, right? Dude, you got incoming fire, right? You have got
all the time.
Yes, incoming fire, and it comes hard and it comes fast. And there's components of it where you're like, is this really what this person is this
right.
real?
Is this even happening?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it does some crazy stuff, man, like especially in the brain, right? So like, are you guys familiar with the term neuroplasticity?
I love it. I've been chasing it all my life.
Awesome. Right. So like it's such a, I will say nowadays, it's a very, I don't want to say played out term, right? But it's used quite a bit, but a lot of folks don't really understand how it works, right? And what it is, right? So when you break it down, right? So like neuro, right? Obviously having to do with your neurological system. And then plasticity comes from the Greek word plastos, which means to mold, right? So how it is that you can then shape and mold your nervous system and your stress response system to different stimuli that are going on in your environment. Well, dude, when you come from the background and the environment that you guys come from, right? How it has been molded and how it is that you regulate certain responses and different stressors that happen in your life, like from a value system, what is actually important and what is not. It is a vast difference than being a full-time podcaster versus going down and kicking doors and doing bad things to bad people, right? And so when you start playing in the medium of the different value systems that exist there, it does a freaking huge tornado on neuroplasticity because you have all these new synapses, all these new things that you don't quite understand, but you do want to understand, and you kind of start to plug and play as you go, and it gets messy. Like it really does. It does. Yeah, it gets really, really messy, right? There's a lot of meshing, a lot of overlapping, and in time, and I love the fact that you said 10-year project, right? Because understanding the importance of consistency, like it will settle, the dust will clear, right? And you're going to be able to now have this other side of your brain and this deeper understanding of values of folks that you're dealing with and talking to that have asked you, like, Shaun, man, can you start pumping content? We want to hear what you have to say. Like it fills our cup. Well, you go back to, like, from a value perspective, the idea of service and serving others and leadership,
100%.
right? And influencing others to achieve that common objective of make tomorrow 1% better, right? Just be a little bit better tomorrow. What can I do to pour into your cup? You start having this neuroplasticity that happens between both different identities, right? This quiet professional, but yet the guy that's out there, but you're kind of serving the same mission.
Crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And so, but it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I applaud you for it, man, because it does. It takes a certain level of courage to just say, I'm putting it out there. Like, I'll give you an example on my end. Like, when I wrote my book, like I'll tell you guys, man, I believed in it 110%, but same thing, incoming fire, right? And like every person from any academic institution, especially in behavioral sciences, psychiatry, psychology, I prepped myself for war. I'm like, oh, this is going to be rough. This is going to be rough.
Was it rough though?
But it wasn't.
Okay.
It wasn't. Yes. And that's the thing, right? I was walking and I was going to have to fight Godzilla. And the truth of the matter is, you know, it was a Chihuahua version of Mike Tyson at best, right? But my mind, I was amping it up, man, to be this thing. And once I got in it, right? And it's like, okay. And then I start getting feedback from people that it's helping, right? And especially folks that I work with in the military, and how it's changed relationships with their life and with people in their lives, and also the relationship they have with themselves. I'm like, that's it. Like, I need to be doing this more often because that's what I'm about, right? So it spoke to my value system in that way. So that was a bit of a tangent. Sorry.
No, that's super cool because it reinforces what's happening with me. I mean, the truth of what you said is the truth for me. And I will say this, just to not to derail us. I don't even know where we're going with this. I love these conversations, though. The idea being that, as I'd said 2 days ago, with when Chance and I were on the collective with Jason and with Clay, and I was saying to them that, you know, Generation 1.0 Shaun, who was in Tier 1, and Generation 7.0 Shaun right now, who's now in his 7th career, man, all of those Gen 1 point right through to 7 point, that's a lot of Shauns that I draw down on every day. And to your point, that's a lot of neuroplasticity. But as I said to those boys the other day, because, you know, sometimes I feel like I hog the mic or whatever. Sometimes I feel like I say things that I'm trying to make proclamations, but really all I'm doing is just talking about the 7 Shauns. And so I'd said to them, hey, listen, here's the good news, fellas. And we're talking about hard transitions. I've gone through 7s and many more, by the way, micro transitions, but 7 hard, big transitions, career based. And so I feel pretty comfortable with it now. I feel pretty comfortable with a lot of transitionary processes. My advantage over the panel, as I stated to them, is the fact that I'm 60 this year. And I didn't start understanding all of this to the degree that I do now until I got into my 50s, which is what none of y'all are. And you're all doing far better than I was at your age. So by the time you hit 60, I'll be an underperformer. But the main point being that in order to perform, you have to chase, and you have to you have to take the chase and then incorporate into the Generation 9.0 or whatever, and just be that more 3-dimensional human. And so my advantage is just time, not intelligence, perhaps. My advantage is stubbornness and consistency, not like I've got some magical gift. It's just work, man.
But it's so important, Shaun, because like the thing about it is just like a fine meat, right? Like what matters is how long has it marinated, right? How has it been treated right before it cooked? And point. You cannot replace that. I don't care. Like I could sit here and talk to you guys about all these things from a behavioral perspective, and that's great. I'll spit it out and regurgitate it from a textbook and research all day. But when we start talking from one man to another, one human being to another, the embodiment of a lot of the principles that I will speak to and talk about, my perception, right, is going to be vastly different than yours, Shaun, right? Because I don't have the miles, right? I don't, right? I mean, there's no replacing that. right? And so,
by the way, lucky you, because your wheels aren't squeaking right now like mine are.
Lots of WD-40 in my life, brother.
There's a you brought up a really great point there, Gino. I got this picture in my mind when you said you got to let the dust settle.
Yeah.
And if you've ever been around, a dry corral or anything like that, you got horses and stuff running around, and the dust is starting to pick up and it's going all over the place, and light refracts through it and it makes things look bigger and scarier and larger, and there's less direct perception of whatever anything is. And you said, getting better 1% every day. And it just kind of clicked in my head that those little 1% are all those little dust particles that are just kind of mixing everything up right now because they're all just floating in the air. And as they settle,
yeah, it is.
As they settle, all those 1% start to filter out, and you can start getting a really good picture of what's actually happening. Absolutely. And then you start getting a really good picture of what's there. And then once you know what's there, then you can engage it directly and move forward with whatever you want. It's usually when you've, scaled the mountain, or you can see the horse, or you can whatever. But
just a sec though, I'm not pushing back. Let's just tease out a little bit of nuance here. It's not pushback, it's nuance.
I like nuance.
And so, let's see that visual moment where there's lots of dust in the air. Seen it many times myself. And guess what? You don't have to wait for the dust to settle to get to work. You're still working in the dust.
Yes.
And you're still going to get the job done in the dust. And you're not going to have the full clarity of what you're doing because it isn't a clear picture yet. But you will still work, you will still accomplish, and it may not be the most effective and efficient outcome, but it will be an outcome that you will learn from. And through experience, through time, through hard work, you will see far less dust. You will still be doing the same job, but you will be doing it better with greater clarity.
So a really important thing, right, to both your points is whether you're waiting for the dust to settle, right, or you're pushing through and you're continuing to work, right, there's a component of resiliency, right, that has to happen, right, that has to be present. But that resiliency has to be forged in confidence, right? And I think there's a huge misunderstanding, especially nowadays in a culture and a time, especially in first world nations, where it's right here, right now, happen. I want immediate gratification, immediate satisfaction. And we put a lot of the collective consciousness that we establish of our identity, right, into these things, right, and social media and all this other stuff. But when you break down confidence, what are we actually saying, right? So confide, Latin, right, with faith, right, with faith in what? Yourself. So how well do you actually know yourself? How deep of an understanding do you have of those mental models that are within to know, is it time for me to let the dust settle, or is it time for me to push through? And do I have the skills and the belief that I can do either? Right, knowing that it's a choice. But then you start talking about, this is where the marinating really comes into play, right? Like, to know, is it time to push through, or is it time to sit back and let it settle? That right there, that's wisdom. And that wisdom,
it's the trick.
This is the fun part, though, right? This is where, with enough time, and I think I love Shaun's idea of versions, and because I heard or I may have read this on the internet at one point in time, and it was you're not starting over, you're starting with experience, right? So anytime that you have to do something new, you can engage all that experience. Might be completely new, but then you can start applying it into things, applying your experience into things. But I think the benefit of all this, of entering into that new stage, is that you get to utilize all of it. Like, you get to, versus we were talking about this, or not exactly, or you can just blank slate it, but it allows you to expand the neural pathways, right? And go like, oh, let's drive down this pathway. I used to use this term or this example when I was dealing with guys that were struggling. And I was saying, when you walk across, you remember in school when there was that big field and the kids always would walk across that one pathway, right? it would get easier and easier and easier, and that pathway would get more worn down. And then I'd say, okay, we'll make a hard left turn on the path. Well, you're going to go into the grass, and then trail's going to be a little harder. But if you do it enough times,
exactly,
that pathway gets easier. But you also, if you don't step off the pathway into those new exploded areas, then you never know what's out there.
That's exactly right. That's exactly. And and it's interesting, right? And kind of taking it back to our last conversation about just as a micro example, like jujitsu, right? Like the confidence, the hardest day, anyone's hardest day is the first day on the mat, right? And like everything that comes along, right, with just getting your clock cleaned. I mean, like at the end of the day, like I don't care who you are, if you've never done it, when you do it for the first time, it's you're gonna get humbled. No two ways about it. But do you have the intestinal fortitude and the confidence to say, you know what? I suck. Like I know I suck, and I'm okay that I suck because I know I'm gonna get better. So many people stop at and with your analogy, Chance, about the path, like going down the path. Well, the rundown path is the one that everyone knows. It's comfortable, it's cozy. Well, let's get comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? And jiu-jitsu does a great job at teaching you how to do that, right? But there's so many other mediums that can do that as well. But it applies to every single facet of life. And where does the belief come from that I know I'm going to suck, but it's going to get better? Or I know I haven't done this before, but if I just keep believing in myself and pushing myself, it's going to open a new vantage point, right? And then you start talking about firing off. I mean, on the scientific side, that's neurogenesis, right? You are literally creating new neural pathways. You're creating new ways of synaptically firing off your understanding of how the brain functions and how it is it economizes motion with your identity and different things that you choose to do or not. So it's an incredibly important thing. And I will tell you, like, I have seen this time and time again. You're seeing less and less of it nowadays. People having the ability and the tenacity and the belief in themselves, right? That they can go and do these things. The reality of it is it's a choice. You absolutely can. It's not a fun one because it's not your normal, but you're going to create a new normal. You just got to give it some time.
It's a great point.
Yeah, actually, that was my jam. That's what I've been doing for a long time to a lot of people.
I believe it.
And it comes out of, I just recently listened to the psychological profile of an operator by Dr. Art Finch. It's a 68-minute long podcast. I've said it a couple of times now over the last few days. I encourage everyone to go listen to it. Yeah. Now, what I learned from that podcast is because of the way I'm wired, I love change, man. I love change. I love change. And so not only do I love change, I love changing people even more than I love change. I love creating change. I've always considered myself an agent of change. Now, that's a goofy title. Maybe I'm not, but that's how I think I am. And that's how I've seen myself run life. And so my background is, of course, interesting. But when I went into high performance race coaching, I brought my background with me, which was about smash, crush, adversity, bring it. And so that's what I did with all of my athletes. I've said it once or twice before. I took all of my ultra endurance, high performance athletes around the world and turned them into JTF2 2.0.
Love it.
That's just the way I know how to do things. And guess what? They rode the freak train with me.
Yeah.
The adversity with a capital A. And I've done my fair share of reading. I stated in my live chat today, believe it or not, that when I first started coaching, that first year of the 15 years, I was all about the PubMed. I got my nerdery on. I read voraciously. I tried to become a neuroscientist, believe it or not, in my head.
Yeah.
Not in my white lab coat. So I made my efforts. I learned some things. And then I started applying the academic model against the real sort of humankind in front of me with a fairly big body of lab rats, by the way. And so I observed what I observed and I tweaked how I tweaked and I took my background and then made my JTF2 2.0 ultra endurance racing team. And I got to see over a course of years how adversity manipulates neuroplasticity and gets the outcomes that I want so that I'm creating change and they're seeing their most awesome versions of themselves. But more importantly, they're experiencing the journey so that when I bounce, which was just last year, because I had to take on this goofy podcasting nonsense. When I bounce, I could look at the person that I'd been coaching for 10 years, Julie Cannon, and say, now you're the coach. Go do it. And everything was in place, not everything, but enough for her to take and then continue that neuroplasticity drive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was never into a job. Yeah. I was into creating a body of work that would carry for generations, you know?
A change ninja. That's the name for you right there.
That's precisely what I'm trying to do, buddy.
I like that.
Go ahead, Gino.
Shaun, I want to go back to something you said, right? So this idea of change and you just thriving off of change, right? Is that something that you feel that you were born with? Was it something that was developed and conditioned as you got into your career in the military? Like, when did you really notice that, no, that's my jam? Like, bring it.
Oh, that's a good question. Nobody's asked me that, and I've never thought about it. I've never identified a timeline. So I just went through my quick catalog, and I would say this, that I don't know if I ever fully realized that that's what I do until I'd been doing it for a long time. And I retrospectively looked back and thought, oh, I guess that's kind of what I do.
Yeah.
And of course, I did it throughout my military career. Let's see. I did it through military. I did it through Ontario Police College. I did it through computer system engineering. I did it through international security work. I did it through coffee shop. And then I did it through high performance coaching. And probably the first time that I realized it was with coaching.
Gotcha.
So that took me a long time to realize, I think.
Right.
And so it probably, I realized that around the time I was maybe 45-ish.
Gotcha. So the idea of change running synonymous, right, with adversity, and it's a challenge, right? So this idea of, oh, you say I can't, or you're saying that it's really, really difficult.
Oh, that's, okay. I love hearing that.
Yeah, right. And so, and I ask you that because it's very interesting. A lot of folks that fall into the soft community, obviously being comfortable with the uncomfortables is it's a reality, right? On top of that, there's contingency for the contingency for the contingency for the contingency, right? And so this idea of shift the variables on me, I don't care. I've got this. Exactly.
Actually, right? Please do.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like let's make it fun, right? Like what do you got? Right.
Only 10 variables. Give me 12.
Well, and that, right, the thriving off of that, right? It's a powerful, powerful thing. But again, when you take a look at, I hear Shaun 7.0, right? So how many iterations, and then it really it didn't come to light that you really embodied and wrapped your arms around that idea until you were in your 40s and your 50s, right? Like, oh, that's what's going on. And that's the thing. And that's the jam, right? For me, what I look at is how do I figure out to get that understanding and that messaging to the 19, 20, 21-year-old who just signed up for the military? Mm-hmm. How do you get them to begin to understand that?
So I've just thought about it a little bit deeper. My apologies for my not hasty answer to you earlier on. I kind of started thinking about around 45-ish or whatever, seeing the kind of pattern, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, you got to form a trend, looking through your body of work, and then you start like maybe understanding, oh, is this a pattern? Mm-hmm. For me, it's like this. Create the baseline, understand the trend over a timeline, start shaping the pattern. Once I understand the pattern, I incorporate the pattern into my worldview of patterns. And I've run my life through patterns all through the world. And the reason I use patterns is because I can autonomously offload the processes. And then I'm just like flowing through the world, and the patterns allow me to adjust autonomously. Mm-hmm. And so right around 45-ish, I kind of saw what was going on. But it took some time for me through coaching to realize, oh, not only do I like doing it, I'm actually quite good at it, and it fills me. And I was seeing lots of excellence from my athletes. They were appreciating the excellence. They were getting exposed to thoughts and things that they'd never seen or heard before, because I'm a freak sometimes. And so I was pushing the envelope. I was getting all of that stuff into them, and they were expanding into their awesomeness. And I was really digging on it. Mm-hmm. So I could look back through my 15 years and think, yeah, I was an agent of change, but as I said, I just recategorized my answer. And here's a better answer for you, pal. And this is more correct. Mm-hmm. And I hope that this will be helpful for you in the question that you just asked. Mm-hmm. So it's probably been about a year since I've realized that I can do it, not at will, but I can do it. And I enjoy doing it. And the internet has taught it to me. Because I've just got so much feedback loop coming at me on the daily now. Yeah. And it's not that I need the pats on the back. I just need little minor calibrations. Mm-hmm. And guys and girls are reaching out and say, dude, that was so rad. That was so awesome. Could you talk faster? Could you talk slower? Could you stand taller? Could you stand shorter? Whatever the feedback loop is that I get. And they're rapid. And it's really helping me understand my vector a whole lot faster. But
Definitely.
I said it out loud today in my live chat, and I'm going to say it out loud over here on the collective. Probably one of the most magnificent things that have happened to me has been the last 2 months. It's the firmware upgrades that I'm getting here on the collective.ca and in my live chats by interacting with the internet, interacting with guys like you who make me think deeper, who make me evolve by tomorrow. And it just feels like talking to cool people about cool things that expand my thought processes, creating real-time neuroplasticity.
Absolutely.
By tomorrow, I've got yet another firmware upgrade.
Absolutely. So I'm interested, right? So Chance, on your end, right? The idea of change with your military career, right? And kind of looking at life now, and how does it you embrace it? Do you share some of the same experiences or understandings that Shaun does, or is it a little different for you?
It's a little different on my end. I always liked the challenge, but I never dove into it like Shaun did. Yeah. So it was always just like, a challenge came my way, I would like, all right, let's get it on. Yeah. But I would never like seek that change. And I found that I was actually just talking about this with Shaun the other day. I really enjoy being a facilitator. This is what I love. It's like linking people up and say, oh yeah, you need that. It's over there. You want that? Oh, it's up that way. And so versus being the agent of change, I find myself more as like the gatekeeper, or not the gatekeeper, but that's a bad connotation to it. But I don't know, the guy gives directions. The traffic cop. That's who I am. I'm like, ooh, this way, that kind of stuff. That's what I really love doing. Yeah. That's why I think I got into podcasting initially, because I had a lot of guys coming who were just saying, oh, this is hard, or this is tough, or not doing well. And I would, I know a guy, or you need a doc. There's a guy, like, and it started kind of bleeding into it from there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so slightly different, but similar.
No, but it's really interesting, right? And like, so there's something that I talk about in my book. It's called the 7 layers of successful relationships. And in the first layer, what I talk about is this concept of connected disconnection. And the idea of we are more connected now, right? As far as humanity, right? Like technology I can FaceTime. We're doing this right now. We're in different countries, right? Like, and we have people tuning in and listening. So we're incredibly connected. And yet we are incredibly disconnected with ourselves at the same time, right? And so when you start looking at cracks that exist in the fabric of what it means to be human, what it means to have that deep understanding of the importance of alignment, right, within myself, so I can align with others, then you start talking about the power of social capital, right? And I think you guys really have it. In my experience, I have learned that because of like combative camaraderie, right? Just like you kind of experience that brotherhood and sisterhood in jiu-jitsu or other martial arts, right? It's obviously amplified when you go to combat, like actually into war with someone. And you guys understand the importance and value of relationships, right? With people you actually align with and can trust, because you both have said it, right? Like getting that affirmation and that validation from those people, that's all the fuel that I need. I don't need people to pat me on the back. Just tell me, no, man, you know what? That really resonated with me. Gold, bro.
Check.
Like, gold, right? And that has very, very deep roots, because now there's not this idea of I'm doing it for my own personal gain. Wrong. The reason I'm doing it is to serve, right? I want to continue to serve folks that I know that I can help see things just a little bit differently to make their quality of life or their experience in this journey of life that much better. And that's a really powerful thing, right? And so it's all in how you use the tools, right? From a connected disconnection thing. But at the same token, so many folks don't go into it, right, with that understanding, with that mission, and actually run true to that mission, right? And I think you see a lot of it's very apparent.
Yeah, we there's this great line I like using. I shared it as a reel. It was from the Shaolin Temple, Europe, the Grandmaster there, and he says this really interesting way of saying exactly what you just said. But it was, if you spend your life, if you need to spend your life seeking out to make the lives around you better, and if you don't do that, your personal suffering won't stop. And so it's not about you. It's about all of them. And if you can make those people better in any way, if you can help them lessen their own suffering in any way, then your suffering lessens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Move forward.
Yeah.
So we got a couple comments here.
Yeah.
108 said age brings years of experience for some, but for others, it brings the same year of experience repeated X number of times. And I think that's accurate because the really key thing on that was it's the choice, right? You can use those years and create experience, and you can also just have that same year over and over and over again.
Well, you're right. But the choice only exists if you know that there's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can run your Groundhog Day program for 40 plus years or whatever and never have understood that you had the choice to be more awesome. Because maybe everyone around you is doing Groundhog Day and you've never met anyone awesome. You think they're awesome, but you've never expanded your concentric circle to the degree where you bump into the super freak and think, what? There's super freaks in the world? How does that even, can I be a super freak? So the inspirational note being that there's lots of people out there that repeat the same year because they just don't know that they have a choice to be more.
Yeah. Any thoughts on this one, Gino?
So this one's interesting, right? Because it does, when you start thinking about the power of choice and this idea of, okay, so yes, I could have A, B, C, X, Y, Z number of years under my belt, right? And have a conscious awareness that there is a choice, but a subconscious block of actually being able to execute on that choice, right? And this is where it gets really interesting from a mental model perspective, right? Because mental models will depict habits, habits will depict outward expressions of behavior, right? And so when you start looking at what does it take for me to break a mental model, right? We start talking about some deep stuff, right? As far as like what's going on consciously and subconsciously. But when you start taking the agency and taking the initiative to make that choice, right? To your point, Shaun, you have to know that at that moment in time, at any given moment, you do have the free will to make that choice. But the
branching choices, baby.
Right, it's exactly right, right? But the constraints, the weight, right? That 500-pound gorilla that has its arms wrapped around you saying, no, you don't. You're not going anywhere. This is how it is, baby. Like no left, no right. You are going right down the middle. Like that's a very real thing. When in reality, to just stop and pop our head out and see a different vista, it's there. It is so there, but yet it is so difficult at the same time. Are you guys familiar with the Johari window?
I am not fully familiar with it. I have read a touch about it.
Okay. So long and short, right? It is this theory that came out in the 50s and essentially by two psychologists. And basically what it says is at any given time, there's different domains in which every single human being will operate. One of the ones that's focused on the most, right? It's what's called blind spots, right? So it's this idea of you may know that about me, but I don't know that about me. Right. And the outward expression of what's coming and how it is that it's being perceived as it's being funneled in through the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus, and it's being embodied, right, by how it is that you are managing the identity component of our interaction, right? There's a bit of a gap that exists there because I think I'm coming across like this and you're actually thinking to yourself, no, not at all. Like, that's not jiving, right?
Yeah, that Johari window needs some glasses.
So it's a very, very real thing. And I bring that up because so many of us live in a blind spot where we think we know, but we don't. And that falls part and parcel with this idea of knowing if I have a choice or not. Right. Yeah. So it's the idea of what are you doing to push the envelope to understand that there is a choice, but you just have to break the constraints that are holding you back at a mental model level. Right. And it's work. It's not freaking easy. It's work. Like it
is. And again, not to be pedantic, because I use the same, I say the exact same thing, pal, on the regular.
Yeah.
However, just recently I started considering like changing the terminology, not from work. I mean, we all know it's work and no amount of Disney movie is ever going to change that. But I want people to be excited about the work. So when they're in the real time, as we all are right now, and you have that branching decision in the real time, it shouldn't be like, ugh, or it shouldn't be like, oh no. It should be like, freaking yes.
Yes, exactly.
Because every single branching point, as long as you got your head wired tight, and even if you don't, whatever it is, your branching point is the opportunity to become more awesome, which is what you should be excited about, rather than thinking like, oh no, change, I fear it. So even if you make the wrong decision, whatever that means nowadays. I don't know. But let's say you go left instead of right at that branching point. Guess what? 12 iterations down the pipeline, you'll recalibrate. And you know what those are called? Freaking life lessons. And whether those life lessons occurred within a minute or a day or a year or 10 years, it doesn't matter. You will eventually get back on course as long as you keep realizing that every branching point is an opportunity to become more awesome and get freaking excited about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that right there is so important, Shaun, because you said two words that really hit, right? You will. Those are very powerful. You will bump. You will, whatever that is, to have the belief that you will. And even if that's all you got, I don't know how, I don't know where, but all I got is the idea that I will. What is it?
I've run most of my life.
No, but it's a pivotal component when we start talking about resiliency and intestinal fortitude and opening up, right, the different domains and the possibilities for what could be for your life. If you're not playing in that space of, well, what could be, what are the potential opportunities and possibilities to be a better version of myself instead of being confined, right, to the, what do they call those things, man? The rats run on the little wheels that they run on.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? But like, that's my normal. And that's what I have to look forward to tomorrow without the belief that it could be different. Right. No, but it can be. Just get off the daggum wheel.
Yeah, we talked about this last week actually when I brought up the concept of the mob and the philosopher. I got a prompt in my journal that asked me, you know, are you with the mob or are you with the philosophers? And I was like, well, I am a philosopher within the mob because you can only recognize yourself as one of the philosophers from looking up from the mob when you're like, oh, look at all this new stuff. But yeah, I love talking about this. This is what, again, why I love the collective. We got another couple comments here. So
and why we love Gino.
And why we love Gino, right? This is just great conversation. Hunden says, I met people in their 20s and 30s who are much deeper thinkers than some people in their 50s and 60s, 100%. My goal is to stay open-minded and to always learn new things. Could not agree more with that.
Yeah, and you know what? Since we're talking about Hunden, or not talking about him, but we're just about to, because Hunden follows me over on my IG feed, and he and I have DM'd, and he's not a regular of my live IG, but he is fairly regular, and he throws up comments from time to time, and his comments are legit. I love them; they make me think, etc. He understands how all of this works, but his comments, as he puts them into the IG live chats or puts them in here, just reinforces the fact to me that there's other people out there who get it.
Yeah.
There's people who get it, and there's people who don't. And I know at one point I didn't get it either, but somehow I managed to bridge the gap. And now that I'm on the other end of it, looking back and thinking, how can everyone else get it? There's a way. Obviously, Hunden figured it out. We all figured it out to some degree. And I think that, as he states, in their 20s and 30s, much deeper thinkers, those deeper thinkers that I met as young deep thinkers, they came about that by meeting older deep thinkers. Their early wisdom is passed on from old wisdom.
Man, Shaun, you just hit a massive golden nugget. Oh my gosh. And I say that because I'm on a personal level. Like for me, my best friend is 68 years old, right? I grew up with mentors and I was, 19, 20, 21 college kid. And I'm having lunch and hanging out with guys who were in their 50s and their 60s, right? And I had a very hard time, right? And I had a hard time hanging out with folks in my peer group, right? And like having discussions that I didn't feel were bearing any fruit or had any meat or potatoes on it. And just over time, right? Like over decades now, I look at it and a lot of the wisdom that they shared with me, it planted a seed, right? But I didn't know how to apply it, right? And now as time going marinating, right? Now it's kind of those plants are really starting to sprout flowers, and I'm starting to see this is what they're talking about, right? And it actually enhances the academic side of it that much more, because I could sit there and talk to you all day about neuroscience, psychology, behavioral science, but if I'm not framing it and if I'm not funneling it in a way via my communication that's actually applicable to you in your life, I'm just babbling. Like, what's the point? Like, you're not moving the needle to help me at all, dude. Like, the whole idea of doing this is one human being pouring and having an exchange with another for us to be better. And if you're not doing that, you're just doing it just to check the box, right? And then at that point, what's the freaking point?
Well, that is an excellent point, and I'd just like to build off that a touch because I find that a lot of, no, I'll rephrase it. Generally speaking, there are coaches or deep thinkers or philosophizers or agents of change, we'll call it, that believe one way to do it is to spit out the verbiage or put out the action and then just carry on and not look backwards. They figured that they've got it figured out and that in the real time, they're just creating all of that change and doing all of that good stuff. And they just keep on moving forward and creating it in the real time and they never look back. That's not the way I ran my program. I was changing change in the real time, but I was always looking backwards to see what that change produced. There are times, many times, that I've looked at an athlete, either pre-race, during race, post-race, doesn't matter, whatever. I've looked them square in the eye and said, remember when I planted that seed in your mind a year and a half ago? Here's what it is. You're doing it right now, etc. And so I've planted many a seed in many an athlete and seen the outcome of it. And it's only being seen by them and by me by drawing the attention to the fact that that seed occurred on that day. You just didn't know that that's what was happening. And here's why you didn't know, because I didn't want you to know, because we need to reflect back on what the occurrence was so that you can understand in the future, you're capable of doing this when I bounce. Whoever puts a seed in your mind that's positive, righteous, good, whatever, however you want to categorize it, trust that the process of you doing your best against that seed is going to flourish into the awesomeness that it will be.
That's that first trip down the pathway, right? And then you got to do that pathway a couple more times, and then you got to keep working that pathway, and then it's stuck in there. Any thoughts on this, Gino, before we move on to one last comment?
One of the things that kind of just strikes me, though, is trust the process, right? And it is so true, right? But trust. When you really start unpacking that, and this is where it gets really interesting, right? One of the things that you said, Shaun, is a lot of people push it out there with no regard to look back, right? I'm just going. And I think that there's a massive opportunity that is missed there, right? As far as understanding what it is that you've done, why you have done it, and ultimately how does what you have done align with the mission that you seek to serve, right? And I say that in the sense of an exercise that I have every single person that I get the opportunity to work with professionally. I start off our very first session with them writing their own personal constitution, right? So I'm going to put you in a room with a blank sheet of paper for 30 minutes, and I want you to write down everything about yourself that it defines you, right? Because then I can start to look at what your value system is, or what you say it is, right? And then we can start doing a cross-examination about what actionable items you do every single day that either align with that constitution or don't, right? And the crazy thing is that the majority of people that I have worked with and I do that with, their actions are rarely in alignment with what it is that they've written down, right? And I say all that to say, right? Because now we start talking about trust. Well, what about trusting myself? Well, wait a minute. I say I'm this, but my actions say something else. So if I can't even trust myself to be authentic, right? How am I supposed to trust somebody else and the seeds that they pour in me? And the crazy part about that is if you just take a chance, right? If you just take the chance.
Dude, so true.
Right?
I mean, I'm standing right here.
Yeah. Right. But that's what it takes. Right. But again, what does it take to have the confidence to take the leap? Right. You have to have that semblance of belief, man. It's got to be there.
Well, there's another piece, and I know you know this, so whatever. This is not for anyone else. This is for the interwebs.
Yeah.
So there is that. The individual has to have trust in the process. And that, by the way, that trust in the process can be 10%, can be 80%, can be 74%, can be 100%. Doesn't matter. Some form of trust in the process that I will be able to calibrate over a timeline to turn it into 100% trust. So show up with 10% trust in me. I'll make you 100% trust me in time through my actions, through my demonstration of who I am and how I can help you. Now, the other piece is that They should have some trust in themselves. They should have some trust in me. It is a duality of effort. It is a parallel process. You've got to believe in yourself, but you've got to believe in the process. And the process, as it turns out, it's me standing in front of them as their coach. And so there's, to my point, you can trust yourself to some degree. You can trust your process or the coach to some degree. But really what's happening is you're learning to trust the species. You're learning to trust the entire system that's wrapped around you. And the moment that you disbelieve in yourself or stop trusting yourself, and the moment that you believe the process in front of you is not serving you well and it's broken and it's scary and that's wrong, well, now you've stopped believing in the species to some degree. And that's puts people in a place where they're like in a bit of a negative spiral because they can't trust themselves. They can't trust the process. What are they trusting? Spiral. And so it's our job to put the word out there or to act in accordance to not a beacon of light. I'm not a freaking lighthouse. Is just to put out a representation of I've just met too many people and worked on behalf of too many people to make them more awesome. And I know it's possible. You've just got to work with the right people, find the right people, do the right thing in order to see that the species is freaking kick-ass. But unless you've experienced kick-ass, it can feel like this all sucks.
That's exactly right.
So you've got to commit to a process with the right person so that you can see your awesomeness. And then guess what phase 2 is? Go out and do it yourself. Go be more awesome for someone else. Be their process.
Yeah. We're going to run out of time real fast here, but I did want to bring up a quick point here. You guys were talking about trust. And I remember every time we did anything in the military, it was always, you got to trust the process, trust the instructor, trust that, these people know what they're talking about. And you do to a point. Up until you start doing things like rappelling or climbing or parachuting, where there is a point where you have to put your entire body at risk, right? It is no longer like, oh, I'll just go over here and I'm going to do push-ups or I'm going to be tired or I'm going to be whatever. When you first have to lean off the edge of a rappelling tower, you have to trust the equipment at that point, right? So it's this tangible thing that you can see that is connected to you that you're like, okay, well, this is like, it should work. But it might not. And that trust
it might
is
not.
that
whatever. It might not. Being in that position 1 gajillion times, and here's my thought. Whatever, man. I'll deal with it then. Because I can't shape it. I can't control it. All I've got is now. Real time now. And on my real time now, as I hang backwards off of that whatever, and I'm thinking, oh, this sucks, which is often what I think. Whatever, man. A second from now, if the rope breaks, I'll deal with that then.
Yeah. And I think something that's really important that you guys are touching on, right? It's this idea of I can't control that, but I can control this, right? And there's a big distinction there, right? And so when I can sit there and say I can control this, well, what have I done, right, to understand and master from a self-mastery perspective, right, what this is? And that is where we really start getting into the nuts and bolts from an alignment perspective, right? And what it is that I have done, who have I surrounded myself with to prepare for that moment where the other variables I have no control of, right?
100%.
Yeah. Yes. That was exactly what I was going to get at. We got another question here, but we got like a minute and a half left. But let's see if you can just touch it. No, you sure?
Come on, a minute and a half? Are you kidding me?
All right. Well, then let's wrap her all up. We'll have to have you back on, Gino, so you can answer this question and many others and get to the actual topic 100%. That we were going to talk about to begin with.
Oh, we had a topic. How fascinating.
Yeah, I had a couple actually, but no bigs. Shaun's hogging the mic again.
No, you're a facilitator and you did an amazing job. Gino brought the heat. I'm just poking little buttons, man. I'm just trying to drag. I'm trying to drag us in areas that sometimes don't get dragged into. I want all of us to learn. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
These are great conversations.
So, Gino, any final thoughts on anything we've gone over? We've crossed quite a
Yeah, no, man.
Chasm of ground.
I had no idea what to expect in today's discussion, but this was great, man. I mean, this is my jam, right? So like, I don't, you know, from a closing perspective, it's you know, when you start breaking down the pillars of understanding what it takes to achieve a certain level of optimization as a human being, right? And like for lack of a better term, but like optimizing, right? So functioning at the highest and best use I possibly can, right? How you define highest and best, right? Just don't undersell yourself, man, right? Like the potential and the possibilities for what could be, that's all rooted in the choice, the small choices that you make every single day. Like that is the root of change. Start there, right? And do it in micro doses. And it's amazing when you do force yourself to look back, what's there is just, it's pretty daggum cool.
Yeah. 100%. Shaun, any final points? Last thoughts?
Said it before I joined the Army. I was a skinny, underperforming kid. Now I'm less skinny and I'm less underperforming. I can look back over many decades now and think, yeah, you know what? I did all right. And that's really kind of the key, man. Every day you might not see the growth. You might not be able to think, yeah, I did all right today. You might not even be able to do that this week or this month, but you should be able to do it over the year.
Yeah.
A year is where you should be able to see change.
Yeah.
And so that's what I encourage people to do on the regular is don't sweat the details of the day. Just do your freaking best. Yeah. And the rest will sort itself out. And with a backwards glance of about a year or maybe a 10-year project, you'll be able to look back and think, yeah, I did all right.
Nice.
This is the way, man. This is the way. I think as long as we can continue to do this, like we've been doing here on the collective, every day we learn, we then build upon it, and we grow every day here on the collective. So until you see you again, that's tomorrow. Gino, everybody.
Gino.
Later, guys.